I will now give the floor to our brilliant moderator, Simon Norrthon. Simon is the president of Scen Film, the Swedish Union for Performing Arts and Film, and also one of the vice presidents of FIA. Simon, the floor is yours.
Merci, Camille. Good evening, good morning, everyone. I'm so happy there's such a big turnout for this webinar. This is, of course, one of our big future issues, and it's really affecting all of us. And I'm really eager to hear what the performing arts can do to be a part of the green transition. We have a great panel tonight, and I'll let them introduce themselves. I start with Isabel Amian.
Bonjour, je fais une petite présentation.
Oui,
Volontiers. Je suis Isabel Amian, espagnole. Je viens de rentrer en fonction au mois d'août au syndicat suisse romand du spectacle. Je suis arrivée en Suisse il y a 10 ans. J'avais travaillé auparavant dans le monde du spectacle en Espagne, en flamenco. Et quand j'étais en Suisse, j'ai fait presque 8 ans, on va dire, dans un syndicat privé. C'est pour ça que j'ai voulu rejoindre les syndicats suisses romand du spectacle, car les deux objectifs ou les deux grands piliers se rejoignent.
Welcome, Isabel. And Ian Garrett from Canada.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm Ian Garrett. I'm based in Toronto, and I'm here with my colleague at the Center for Sustainable Practice in the Arts, Devon Hardy, who will introduce herself in a moment. In addition to being co-founder and director of the center, and we'll talk about our work in especially in measurement shortly. I'm also on the board of the Associated Designers of Canada, or Stage Designers Union, affiliated with IATSE, as IATSE ADC 659, and I teach stage design, production, and sustainability at York University here in Toronto.
Welcome, Ian. And Devon Hardy, also from Canada.
Hello, my name is Devon Hardy. I live on Tiohtià:ke, also known as Montreal in Canada. My background is in environmental sciences and water resource management, and about 5 years ago, I started working in the arts sector. I helped to manage the adaptation of Julie's Bicycle's creative green tools to the Canadian context, and now I'm the program director of the CG Tools Canada program with the Centre for Sustainable Practice in the Arts.
Welcome, Devon. Karrim Jalali from UK.
Hi, I'm Karrim. I'm an industrial official with Equity in the UK, with responsibility for quite a wide portfolio, and effectively, although not necessarily officially, our kind of lead on sustainability as an official. So nice to meet you all, and thanks for having me.
Nice to have you. Kristine Karåla from NoDa, Norway.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kristine Karåla. I'm a Norwegian artist, dance artist, and I now represent the Union for Dance Artists in Norway. That's dancers, choreographers, and pedagogues in the performing art fields of dance. And the last couple of years, the pressure on taking more dramatic actions towards how we can participate in the climate change has reoccurred. So we have had an ongoing work for some time. And now also with me, I have some members who have very actively used our union to make us be even more precise on this matter. And you will meet them later. But thank you for having me and us, and happy to be here.
Happy to have you. And we also have Santoro from Switzerland.
Bonsoir, je m'appelle Santoro. Je travaille avec le syndicat suisse romand du spectacle et l'association des compagnies vaudoises de théâtre pour un projet duquel nous allons vous parler tout à l'heure, les bonnes pratiques. Je viens du monde du théâtre Et puis, j'ai aussi une formation de gestion culturelle.
Great, thank you. Tonight, you will hear of several great initiatives, and you will be confronted with names and projects, and we'll try to post them in the chat during the meeting. If we're not successful with that, but I'm sure we will be, you will get them from Camille later on. So we'll try to catch up. Over the last decade, a number of tools have been created to measure and better understand the environmental impacts of live performance productions. Devon and Øren, could you tell us about the Canadian green tools and explain how this type of tool can help live performance productions becoming more sustainable?
Happy to, and I'll share a presentation that we have. We'll do just a little bit of introduction to sort of our portfolio of work, because it is helpful context for why and how we use the tools. So we're with the CSPA, which has existed since 2008 in one form or another, and we've been doing the creative green tools for the last couple of years, after a couple of years of modification based off of work through our long-term partners with Julie's Bicycle in the UK, and sort of modeled off of the way that they interact with Arts Council England, though we work with different infrastructures here. As an organization, it's a large part of our portfolio right now, but we do a number of other things trying to connect art and arts organizations to sustainable practice. So our longest standing projects are around publications. We release a quarterly print publication, somewhere between a journal and a magazine, on a quarterly basis, hence its name. We also do specialized reports in which we are either publicizing information with partners. We do a large amount of consulting with arts organizations around figuring out how to establish their footprints, benchmarks, and baselines for the environmental impacts, and then build strategy around that, such as with the Fusebox Festival, which is in Austin, Texas. And then also work with individual artists in showcasing different types of practices. This happens both on website and through the quarterly, and then occasionally through individual reports where we're really looking at the balance between how people are making and the things that they're making as well. From a theatrical side, we're one of the key partners in an event called the Climate Change Theater Action, which is we've just about to complete the 5th iteration of it. It was started in 2015 in commissioning global short climate change plays that become available for free that are meant to help folks start to integrate climate change topics into their programming by making that content from playwrights in many languages make that content available. And don't have the final count on the number of events this year, but we've in previous iterations, we've been around 350 events on every continent in the past, and it happens in odd years is when we present it after we do a year of commissioning. We run a project called the Department of Utopian Arts and Letters, which is commissioning artists to create future-oriented syllabuses towards syllabi, course outlines that folks can follow along to observe their idea of a utopia beyond the climate crisis. We got 4 of our featured artists, Aisha Bentham, Christina Wong, Sunita Fezzik, and Julia Havrid, listed here. Do a lot of work in the sector around climate literacy. One of our gatherings with one of our intensives in the Rocky Mountains is pictured here in the lower right. A lot of our work with empowering artists also connects to working with tools. We actually work with a number of different partners around tools. There is, and we'll perhaps be able to share it later, we do help to co-convene a group of tool makers, tools and guide makers from around the world, sort of self-selected ad hoc group that gets together on a fairly regular basis to talk about what's happening within their context. We have some of the examples here, working from the Sustainable Production Toolkit, coming from a collective of makers in the United States, the Sustainable Theatre Guidebook, made by our partners here in Canada, the Canadian Green Alliance, which itself is modeled off of the Broadway Green Alliance, members of the European Theatre Convention, which folks may be familiar with, or that network, have integrated some of this key culture, which is more in the conservation space, and as we'll hear about later, the Theatre Green Book. And actually our co-convener, primary co-convener on these meetings is Patty Dillon, who is one of the originators of the Theatre Green Book project. And we try and also just catalog tools. Our position is that while we make a tool and it's very much tailored to the Canadian arts and cultural sector, that it might not work for everybody. We know that not every tool can work for everyone, but we try and make sure that they're in alignment, or we have similar values between the group that are meeting together, and that we can champion each other's work. And we want somebody to use something to guide their more sustainable approach for what works for what they're doing in the context that they're working. We've done a lot of work, and I might tip it to Devon as program director to talk a little bit more specifically about the creative green tools themselves. But after a multi-year process of evaluation and working with various corners of our sector, we host the tools themselves and work with our partners, the Council québécois des vêtements éco-responsables, to do bilingual delivery nationwide, in which we're deploying with coordination with lots of support from the Canada Council for the Arts and a lot of agreements with individual councils as well. But Devon, I'll turn it to you and move to our next slide to talk a little bit about the tools themselves.
Thanks, Ian. So, I mean, a little bit about the background of the tools, and many folks may know about them already because they have been in existence for quite a while. But they were originally created in 2009 by Julie's Bicycle, and they were really built with this philosophy of helping the creative industries to drive change, and with the knowledge that the creative industries are uniquely positioned to be able to drive change. They were designed to be simple and accessible, take some of that guesswork out of carbon footprinting, which is it can be an exceptionally complicated process, but they've tried to simplify the tools as much as possible so that anybody can do a basic carbon footprint, even if they don't have comprehensive training in it. And the tools were really successful in the UK. For example, over a 6-year period, they resulted in a 41% decrease in carbon emissions, the carbon emissions of the portfolio in England. And over the years, they've been continuously updated and improved with input from the sector, which is what made them such a great option for us. A lot of stakeholders in Canada had been talking for a while and accepted that we wanted to have a similar framework to the UK. And the fact that we'd had this really successful 10-year case study was extremely valuable, as they had already worked out a lot of the kinks. So what are the Creative Green tools? Just in case anybody doesn't know, they are a comprehensive set of carbon calculation and reporting tools that were designed specifically for arts and culture. They can be used across the sector in different disciplines of arts and culture, including, theater, dance, music, literary arts, museums, galleries, that kind of thing. And one of the value adds of these tools specifically is that they not only provide frameworks for creating carbon footprints for buildings, but also for discrete time-limited projects, which is quite rare in terms of carbon footprinting tools for the public. Normally, they're kind of within the context of 1 year of operations of a building, but because arts and culture isn't always building specific, a lot of theater production companies, for example, might not have the building that they're in year round. So these tools are adapted for use in those kinds of situations, and they take into account, energy, water, waste, travel, some materials, etc. So as I mentioned, we adapted the tools to the Canadian context. We didn't just bring them over directly. We felt that it was extremely important to do this because we do have a unique context in Canada that is not matched in the UK. So we actually took 2 years to study the feasibility of bringing the tools here and then adapt them. And that included a lot of different adaptations. We did a lot of cultural consultation with Indigenous communities and Indigenous artists to make sure that what we were offering was not only inclusive of Indigenous communities, but also bolstered and enriched by Indigenous knowledge. We did extra work to make sure that they are accessible. We did like a web accessibility audit to make sure that visually they're accessible for any user. We reviewed the language for inclusion. We translated them into French to make sure that they are bilingual, as Canada has 2 official languages. And they are free to the user in Canada, so that's a huge value add. So as I mentioned, they're designed to be simple and accessible. This is just a screenshot of the platform showing kind of how a footprint is set up. Basically, you choose the kind of footprint that you want to create, whether that's a building, like a cultural building, an office, an indoor event, outdoor event, production tour. And then that footprint is auto-populated with these tabs. So it's very clear what data you need to collect and input. You put in one number for the entire year, for the entire length of the project, to really limit the amount of data entry that you have to do. Most users just fill in the tools once per year, as that's what they have the time to do. And that really simplifies things a lot. So another element of the Creative Green tools is this Beyond Carbon section. In the UK, there was an appetite for metrics that weren't necessarily carbon-based or didn't necessarily have an immediate measurable impact on the calculated carbon footprint. And so Beyond Carbon is basically like a survey of best practices. And we have all kinds of sections, everything from energy use, water use, food, biodiversity on site, resilience. So that's like, are buildings designed to be resilient? Do you have, disaster planning for events, things like that. We also take into account things like divestment in fossil fuels, governance, Indigenous knowledge and sovereignty, digital carbon footprint. There are all these questions that serve both as a way to track your practices, but also, they serve as a form of awareness. So just the act of going through this survey and answering these questions can help to increase awareness a lot of things that you could be doing if you aren't necessarily doing them yet. And so we provide some programming alongside the tools. So all of our programming is in English and French. We offer one-on-one support to users to help them use the platform. We offer training videos, guides, templates for data collection. Plus, we have some additional educational workshops to supplement users' knowledge of how to actually take action. Because that's one of the questions that we get a lot is, okay, I've done my carbon footprinting, now what? So we're trying to provide as much access. If we're not doing the educating ourselves, we're connecting folks to educational resources to help them go that step further. So what are the benefits of the Creative Green tools? There are many. A few are listed here. We really see them as the foundation of a larger environmental framework. They're kind of that core once folks start carbon footprinting, that's when they can start doing more. We see it as a really simple, concrete point of entry. A lot of folks that I talk to they want to do something, but they're not sure where to start. Carbon footprinting is a really great place to start because you can immediately see where your priority areas are in terms of your carbon emissions. It has the potential to increase carbon literacy and awareness in the sector in a big way. The fact that it is a common platform that can be used all across Canada means that it creates points of connection for users. We also have like an online community where users can share best practices, look for collaboration opportunities, things like that. Using a tool like this as well, and the data set that it will give us access to, it gives us the ability to, as a sector, create and work towards science-backed targets. You know, for example, those that are aligning with the Paris Agreement. And it contributes to national and international benchmarking. So, you know, part of the benefit of using the tools is that empowerment of the individual user. But by having this larger data set, we can set benchmarks so that users can actually compare themselves to their peers, because a lot of folks don't know when they get a number as a carbon footprint for their activities. They don't know what it means. Is it good? Is it bad? How do I compare? So having a common tool and getting that larger data set helps us to set those benchmarks. And if we're all doing this kind of work, it really creates that like groundswell of mobilization within the sector. It really creates a positive impact that can create a ripple effect out to other industries, potentially other countries, other communities. It's potentially very, very powerful.
Yeah, so that sort of gives an overview of the way that we are using the platform. It has been implemented in a number of different locations, countries. It's been localized, sometimes just in translation, sometimes in primarily in the emissions factors that go into those. That's one of the big things that we maintain because those work differently. We're very large geographically country, and so those emissions factors change. But it becomes a really important touch point, as Devon was mentioning, with introducing somebody into ways that they're used to reporting or looking at their organization or data that they have on hand, so that when we move to the conversations around the various types of workshops and webinars that we do, we're really looking at how having that knowledge empowers decision-making around how an organization works, how it expresses its values in working towards its environmental goals or towards community sustainability goals as well. So we really see it as part of an overall sort of holistic portfolio of environmental initiatives where we're empowering people both through data and knowledge to entwine those things together so that they're leading on environmental change.
Thank you, Ian and Devon, for an extensive presentation. You've really come a long way. It's really inspiring to hear from you.
Thank you.
While the transition into a sustainable live performance sector must be led by the employers, the unions should also be a part of the conversation. So we will now try to explore how unions have tried to act on this issue. The first step toward a more sustainable industry is to examine your own practices. How have your unions worked to become more sustainable? If I start with you, Kristine, how have you been working in Norway?
Yes, that's it feels like going from really macro to really micro right now. I was really inspired to listen to from how they've done it in Canada. And I have some questions, but maybe I can address them later, or I can address them directly to Devon and Ian later as well. But yes, I will start to do this on a very micro and very close way, because we have strived really to make a difference, both on the micro and the macro level. We see those very well connected. We really tried to start within our own habits, because we need to initiate these significant changes really close to ourselves as well. So in 2019, the Union introduced what we now call the climate commandments. And we see them as a kind of dynamic framework shaping our daily practices in our office community. And just to inform you that we just now changed office with new unions and new people, and having these commandments then was really inspiring also for connecting and starting this kind of new collaboration between other unions that we move together with. So not only are they a tool to help the environment, it's also a tool to, for networking and seeing these rip currents of good change happening quite effectively. I was thinking just to go through these commandments, very simple. It's nothing maybe new and very inventive, but they are really like precise, and it's a good framework to have if one cannot create these huge macro changes at the moment. One can start with this or be inspired at least. So first of all, of course, it has a lot to do what we purchase, both on an administrative level, but also on our operational level. And we always choose environmental friendly papers for printed materials. All our merchandise should be free from environmentally harmful elements. We always prioritize eco-certified consumables, and we evaluate necessity, and we always opt to buy used items when possible. And surprisingly and luckily, it's very much more easy to buy good used items also over the years. So when it comes to our events, we always try to, or we not try, we do, we buy eco-friendly materials for all our events. We have minimized extremely a lot the printed materials, and we always use eco-friendly paper. That's really our mantra. So sustainable merchandise, and we also go for sustainable catering. So we also try to be very conscious when we select speakers to our events, and we always try to see if there's some kind of choose between someone that has a sustainable approach rather than not such a sustainable approach. When we travel and transport, we prioritize collective or eco-friendly transportation. We try not to use taxis, and if we have to, we use electric cars. We encourage walking, cycling, or alternative traveling like trains, and of course video conferences. And we opt for environmentally friendly delivering services. Our food and beverages are vegan, vegetarian, organic, and we have local criteria for all our offices and event food. And we live in Norway, so we can choose tap water over bottled water. There's a privilege there. And we are really conscious about our food ordering, because we really want to minimize our waste. And we have a non-policy on plastics serveware, so we choose biodegradable alternatives. And we really try to select partners that are committed to environmental sustainability. We prioritize eco-friendly options always. And we also try to communicate our environmental requirements to all our collaborators. So when I'm invited to places, I communicate that I have these requirements. So recycling is very important, how we conserve our energy and our practice on that, heat, lights, all these things, turning off the computers, minimizing emails if possible, and of course printing. And it seems, at least as these guidelines somehow has made a kind of change of how we do our things in the office. Then we have also made this comprehensive inventory list for different offices where we are now, so we can share the things that we have, let's say, for events or for social gatherings, seminars, these kind of things. So not each and every one of us in this office collective need to buy or share. So we find ways to sharing instead of buying. Our reflections and goals are really to try and have this discussion on the impact that these the issues with our not being environmentally friendly, to really always speak up towards the need of better tools in meeting with this issue. We also try to find this is a difficult task, and I see Canada has made it quite well, that to find measurable metrics for reduction. We still don't have that very well in Norway. And we have this saying in Norwegian that we instead of feeling shame, we should feel frid, which means the opposite of shame, that you should be really engaged and happy that you take this task upon you and be the change you want to see. And another very practical thing that we do is that we always showcase successful examples that have taken sustainable approaches to a new extreme, and we emphasize the ones that have really made the difference. That was our a simple run through of a very practical.
Simple but extensive. Thank you, Kristine. Do you have these guidelines published on your website, open for everyone to see?
Yeah, but that would be in norsk, so I would have to.
Yeah, but I mean, do you have them on your website? I mean, for your members and partners to take, so they can find it.
A very good question.
You should.
Yeah, we should.
I move over to Karrim. You've cleaned up your union, right?
Well, not necessarily me individually, but as a collective, which we always like to focus on. We have done a lot. So for a bit of context, in 2021, we declared a climate emergency as a trade union. And this was very much a member-led action. So it started as a motion at our annual conference, which was overwhelmingly voted for by attendees, and then was officially ratified by our executive council about 4 to 6 weeks later. And since then, we've put in place measures, first of all, in the work that we do more outwardly facing, but very importantly, for the purpose of this question, more internally facing. And I think there is an important reason to do that as well, is firstly, if we're going to be asking and demanding and seeking employers and these sectors to be better and more sustainable and more responsible, then we have to have a certain legitimacy in how we do that and not be perceived as hypocritical. So we have looked at our main office in Covent Garden so that all the lighting is LED lighting. The insulation is as good as it can be. That is worth saying relative to the building's makeup build in its age, because there's complications in how to insulate and viability, particularly for older buildings and listed buildings, and the legislation that can be sometimes quite cumbersome. And it can also be quite cumbersome for a lot of the older theatre buildings in their ability to retrofit and insulate. We also installed secondary glazing last year, which is better not just for insulation in terms of heat loss or keeping cool in the summer, but actually really important that we steep the climate crisis and understand that there are broader crises that are very interrelated. So of course we, and I can see down here, work right by a very busy road. And so actually by being able to insulate and have secondary glazing, it means that we're not having to open up windows and we're not being exposed to particulate matters and nitrous oxide from the passing cars. So it's also a win in terms of health and well-being of the workforce as well, which is, I think, something that we don't focus on enough, and is a really good key argument when we're making it to employers as to why they should consider the climate crisis, also steeped in the language of well-being and health of the actual workforce. We also explored the viability of solar panels using experts in community energy. Unfortunately, it wasn't viable because of to do with the nature of the buildings that would block the light and block the sun from basically being able to power the solar panels, so it just wasn't feasible. But I think it was really important that we explored the viability of that rather than just not do it in the first place, so that we can demonstrate to our members that we've done everything we reasonably can. And that's because that's exactly what we're going to be asking of other employers and other institutions as well. We also explored the prospects of heat pumps. Again, currently not viable, but it is something that we may look at again as the technology moves on, and also, to be honest, related also to the neighbours as well, and the relationship with our neighbouring buildings as well. We also have supported the Society of British Theatre Design fairly recently with funding towards carbon literacy training for designers, so that they can access training that they might not otherwise be financially able to access. We have changed the way in which members of staff can use internal flights, and also or members as well can use internal flights, which is only for the most exceptional reasons, with the general rule that they will not be expensed. But we have much more to do in terms of the previous comments around merchandise. I don't think we're as selective in how we source the merchandise. We previously, and still do, send out our magazines via a sort of biodegradable bag, but actually research has more recently shown that these bags probably aren't as good as they were sold to us and sold to industries in the first place. They're not very biodegradable, and they're not very good. We do need to change our paper stock, and perhaps how much we print, and consider that have more focus on that. And we also need to better monitor our computer usage. So as a sort of a staffing group, that's something that we need to focus on and push for more. But I think where we have made perhaps the most significant inroads, and where we are looking at the macro rather than the micro, is we've interrogated our own finances in respect of investment portfolios. And so we now are ensuring that the union's investments have been taken out of fossil fuels, have been taken out of arms, have been taken out of gambling, and have been taken out of tobacco. And this is really powerful. Not only does it take money out of polluting industries and unethical industries, but actually there's a really, really key component to divestment, which is once you've got that money taken out, you can place that within more sustainable infrastructure and industries. And by doing so, you give it that extra leg up that they need, particularly because fossil fuel industries have been appallingly subsidized by world governments, way beyond what the alternative sustainable infrastructure has been. So it's a really, really good way of helping those industries scale up and help us with the crisis in general. We've also, as a union, are relatively unique in having a pension scheme for our members that can be used both as a private pension scheme and for employer contributions relating to statutory duties of employers. That means that the employers pay into the scheme. Now, it's quite helpful to have this type of scheme, because otherwise our members, like many of your members, work in multiple member-related jobs over the year, and might find otherwise their pension is in so many different pots that it's just ridiculously unmanageable for them. So we've managed to work quite effectively that in much of the industry where pensions are provided, they have the option of being provided into the equity pension scheme. What that also means is that that pension scheme is valued at approximately over £120 million. So there's a lot of money in the pension scheme. That means that there is also the potential for some of that money to be invested in fossil fuels. And so very much a activist-led piece of work through a network known as the Equity for a Green New Deal network. Actually did some amazing investigative work on the actual pension scheme, the level of exposure to fossil fuels, put together a really robust business case, looking at the fiduciary duties and how changing to a different fund with less exposure to fossil fuels would be in the overwhelming interest of all our pension scheme members. And so they won the argument very convincingly, and the fund has now changed to a much, much lower exposure of fossil fuels as part of the default fund. But they also went even further still and said, well, actually, that's still not good enough because there's still some fossil fuel investments in here, and we don't like that. So we want our members to be able to have the option of being able to opt out entirely from fossil fuels and into a fossil fuel free fund, which they've also managed to win and achieve, which is a great victory for our members, and lots of details on our website, on our Equity for Green New Deal page of how to do that and how to access it. But they've also continued to keep up pressure and work with us as equity staff and the administrators of the pension scheme and provider of the pension scheme, so that there is the prospect, although we can't confirm at this time whether that's definitely going to happen, but that the default fund may move to effectively a fossil fuel free portfolio. So that is on the cards and something to watch this space over. So that's kind of the main focus. Now, I suppose the one thing I did want to talk a little bit is our critique. Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry, Karrim, but I have to interrupt you there. I'm really sorry. We'll come back to you. But it's really clever, I think, to use your money to steer the development of things. It's a really powerful tool if you have the money, which you do. It's great. I'll move over to Ian. How have you been working with stage designers in Canada?
We have similarly mentioned in the chat actually that with the Association of British Theatre Designers, we've had a little bit of work that we've done together because we have similar memberships, and I know most of the folks they join these meetings that I talked about before. We have within our union, we have a green committee, which I'm on and I chair, and we've done the work through a number of different initiatives. We have one in which we were able to receive some funding from our federal funder, or the Canada Council for the Arts, to support our engaging theaters and the freelance designers whom they contract to come up with cooperative projects and offset what they're doing with grant support, which they're able to define how the direction that gets used, whether or not that's for alternative materials or research infrastructure, or supplementing design fees to allow for additional time and concentration on the project itself. That's actually, we're going through a cycle of 10 different projects coming from different parts of the Canadian theatre community, looking at different resources, different sizes of organizations, and different types of engagement, whether or not they're touring or residential, where the resources are coming from, and should have a report coming out early in the new year as we're sort of coming to the end of the last couple of those partnerships. We've also been looking at including green writers within our contracts. We both negotiate with some of our larger entities. We have there's the Professional Association of Canadian Theatres, which we have a large collective bargaining agreement with, but we also set for independent producers, we create a contract with language there, which is oftentimes where we'll experiment with different types of protections. Included within that, we've been developing language that on one hand is around the principles of working sustainably, and then also is around specific commitments that designers and theaters can make together. And there's been input from the PACT, the Professional Association of Canadian Theatres, in how that language comes together, so that there's something, though at this point it might not be a binding part of the collective agreement, that it is something that we can make agreements between each other. One of the big things actually, or at least for me, the big things that I'm excited about is that as we've been doing this work, as tools have become available and we've started to integrate it into the way that our artists are contracted, has been around really focusing on intellectual property. That feels like it's one of the last boogeymen within resistance to sustainable change within the work that we've been doing, particularly with designers. This is important as freelancers. at least they're set up as freelancers in Canada, so that they don't become employees of the theater themselves, but their work and the rights to it is with them. So we've on one hand strengthened the licensing language in all of our contracts around what is protected for the artists, which has been great from a labor perspective. But on the sustainability side, what we're now looking at is tools in which that doesn't stand in the way of sustainable initiatives. As to say that we'd have a number of conversations with theaters or sometimes with designers, but usually on the producing side of things, in which they'd articulate, because the intellectual property listed with the designer, that they would not use any part of a previous design unless it was incredibly generic or not specific to the design, that they would be resistant to use it. Because there are those protections in there. And so what we've started to do is that in the spirit of that, we have a couple of pilot projects running with some of our previous theaters and design combinations, where we're looking at how to articulate those explicitly within addendums or additional writers onto the contracts, so that designers can specify, these are things that I don't want you to use, but everything else is fair game for that, to try and get past those levels of resistance to reusing scenic materials and technical elements. So a lot of the work that we've been doing has been infrastructural and helping to connect sort of all the different parts of our production process, where and align that production side from the theater side, the artistic and administrative oversight of that, with the goals of and protections of the freelancer, and trying to get that into agreements, so that we can sort of take those or at least perceived barriers out of the way for material reuse and reduction there. In addition to similarly, we've been doing literacy specifically around the tools, so that different parts of the theatrical production process, the different staff members there are familiar with them, and that they can work with those shared metrics of where they want to prioritize reductions. As a key example as to where that becomes important, as sort of the last point, and I'll allow us to move on. But then, as I mentioned, we have different emission factors across Canada, where Alberta, which is primarily oil and gas insofar as how their power is generated, is about 50% higher than the global average for carbon intensity per kilowatt hour generated, to put it into jargon, whereas Quebec is less than 2. Because of their reliance on hydroelectric, which we can unpack there as well. So this having the common metrics, especially with artists that tend to be highly mobile and moving between different types of theaters, or work is moving behind, has also allowed us to prioritize aspects of those conversations when we're trying to get to more specific agreements between the artists and the engaging theater, to serve everybody's green and sustainable goals.
Thank you, Ian. Brilliant. Isabel, how have you been working in scrutinizing your union?
Oui, je vais être beaucoup. Oui, je vais être beaucoup plus brève, vu que, en fait, on n'est qu'une personne. Du coup, naturellement, c'est beaucoup plus facile de gérer une structure déjà de manière micro. Évidemment, je suis au télétravail, on réduit toutes les impressions, on prime l'informatique, soit par visioconférence ou même les rendez-vous téléphoniques qu'on met en place. Les permanences sont par téléphone. Et si on a des réunions, bah, évidemment, elles sont dans des espaces de coworking tout près des gares, des villes où on travaille. ça m'a aidé aussi de vous entendre parce qu'effectivement, je fais partie aussi du conseil de fondation de notre caisse des pensions et une des résolutions qu'on a eues a été de justement mettre les fonds, que les fonds soient investis de manière équitable dans des banques qui priment des structures équitables, effectivement, qui soient justes et écologiques. Ça, c'était quelque chose on vient de voter cette année. Et puis, oui, c'était très intéressant, c'est ce que Yann elle vient de dire, parce que on va renouveler notre convention collective et à ce moment-là, peut-être après je parlerai bien avec lui dans ce sens-là, parce qu'on n'est pas encore, on va vous présenter tout à l'heure les projets, mais c'est vrai qu'on n'est pas encore, on s'est pas encore vraiment investi avec les employeurs, surtout les grandes structures. Mais c'est un peu les deux choses qu'on a, oui.
Gracias, Isabel. Well, we'll move over to your project then. I'm a strong fan of social dialogue, and working with employers can be an efficient way of raising environmental standards in the industry. For sustainable change, it's really powerful when we can walk hand in hand. How have your unions managed to work with employers on this issue? And I'll start with you, Isabel and Sandro. You have a project called Les Bonnes Pratiques, please.
Oui, exactement. Mais je vais laisser plutôt la parole à Sandro, qui a été à l'issue du début du projet. Merci.
Oui, déjà, je voulais dire que c'est très inspirant d'entendre tout ce qui est dit durant ces échanges. Je vous remercie. Rapidement sur les bonnes pratiques, c'est un projet qui a été mis en place par le syndicat suisse romand du spectacle et l'association des compagnies vaudoises de théâtre. Donc, c'est des compagnies indépendantes créatrices de spectacles. Le projet Les Bonnes Pratiques, notre projet, il est destiné aux créatrices et aux créateurs, c'est-à-dire aux porteuses et porteurs de projets, les personnes qui sont à la base de l'idéation, de la création du projet. Donc, c'est très important de garder en tête que c'est un projet qui vient du terrain pour le terrain, pour les praticiens et praticiennes. Ce projet Les Bonnes Pratiques, il n'a pas une ambition d'être exhaustif et puis d'être spécialiste. On touche un peu à toutes les questions, tous les objectifs de durabilité. C'est-à-dire que chez nous, en Suisse, on a repris dans le canton de Vaud l'agenda 2030, c'est la politique durabilité de notre canton, qui a réparti les objectifs, les 17 objectifs de développement durable dans des ensembles. Nous, on est revenu aux objectifs de l'ONU et puis on les a redistribués pour obtenir quelque chose, une série de 5 ensembles cohérents par rapport à notre secteur. Donc, on a eu envie, avec ce projet, déjà de sensibiliser puis de diffuser les notions de durabilité. On s'est rendu compte que les praticiens, praticiennes, les professionnels, au début, ils ne savent pas par où commencer. Donc, qu'est-ce que je vais faire pour améliorer mes pratiques? Comment est-ce que je vais faire? Où est-ce que je vais trouver des informations? Donc, par le site qu'on a créé, qui s'appelle lesbonnespratiques.ch, on donne la possibilité aux personnes de débuter, déjà de prendre conscience des différentes pistes d'action pour améliorer leur pratique. Donc, notre démarche, elle n'a rien d'exhaustif, elle n'a rien de figé, si on veut. Je pense que c'est normal. Et puis, elle a un aspect un peu généraliste, je dirais. Ça permet à toutes les personnes, toutes les porteuses et porteurs de projets, de prendre conscience vraiment des directions dans lesquelles aller pour améliorer les conditions de travail, la manière de laquelle on fabrique les spectacles, la santé des employés, toutes ces questions qui sont liées à la durabilité. Et puis, sur le site, en fait, on trouve trois branches, je dirais, trois parties. Une première, c'est des ressources sous forme de blog. On propose différents articles, des choses autant qu'on peut, on alimente. Ça peut être des liens vers d'autres projets, vers d'autres démarches qui sont aussi intéressantes. On a une deuxième partie qui s'appelle le guide, qui est partagé lui-même en trois parties, si on veut, c'est-à-dire la pré-production, avant qu'on débute le projet, la production et puis la post-production. Donc ça, c'est les trois temps forts qu'on a identifiés. On n'a pas réinventé l'eau chaude, hein, c'est un peu comme ça que ça se passe partout. Et puis, la troisième partie, c'est une auto-évaluation qui, elle aussi, est divisée en trois parties, donc en pré-production, en production et en post-production. Et puis, les porteuses et porteurs de projets peuvent répondre aux questions de l'auto-évaluation, puis voir comment elles se situent dans les différentes démarches. Cette auto-évaluation, elle n'a rien de contraignant, donc c'est vraiment, ça part du principe que c'est les personnes qui s'engagent à participer à cette démarche, et puis elle permet à toutes les personnes d'obtenir, en fait, de développer un discours, des arguments sur leur politique, de mettre en place leur politique de durabilité au sein de leur projet, et puis de développer un discours là autour. Ce discours, le but, c'est qu'ils et elles puissent l'utiliser au moment où ils vont devoir défendre leur projet pour obtenir des financements. Ça permet de rendre visibles des efforts que toutes et tous font dans leur projet, qui ne sont pas forcément, jusqu'à maintenant, à notre connaissance, chiffrés ou visibles directement. Puis on s'est aussi rendu compte que dans notre domaine, dans notre région géographique, la difficulté, c'est d'obtenir des fonds pour réaliser des objectifs de durabilité. On est confronté au fait que on ne peut demander des financements que dans le secteur culturel, que dans au pouvoir public, dans les départements, les branches culturelles, alors que ce serait peut-être envisageable de permettre aux porteuses et porteurs de projets d'élargir leur demande de fonds dans d'autres secteurs de la durabilité, un peu comme le font d'autres entreprises puis d'autres secteurs déjà. En gros, voilà, donc, ce que j'aimerais encore dire à propos des bonnes pratiques, c'est que c'est un projet pilote, donc il est encore en phase test, il est très, très fragile, je dirais. On l'a bien posé, mais on s'inspire aussi des retours, des feedbacks qu'on reçoit des personnes qui utilisent, qui fréquentent le site. Et puis, on espère à l'avenir, voilà, dans les perspectives d'avenir, c'est pérenniser déjà le projet, l'étendre à d'autres secteurs, parce que là, on a commencé avec les arts de la scène, mais les problématiques sont identiques, comme on l'a dit avant, comme vous l'avez dit avant, pour la danse, ou pour d'autres secteurs, même les arts visuels, et puis aussi à d'autres régions linguistiques. Ici en Suisse, comme vous le savez, sûrement on parle aussi différentes langues, donc on aimerait bien aussi permettre à ce site d'être accessible facilement à des personnes qui sont dans des régions italophones ou germanophones de la Suisse. Et puis aussi une toute petite région dans les Grisons, on parle romanche. Voilà, en gros. Je pense que c'est une présentation générale de ce projet pilote, les bonnes pratiques. On est en train aussi de réfléchir à une version V1 du site. Pour le moment, ce projet pilote, il est pas automatisé, donc il y a beaucoup de choses, beaucoup de phases qui sont faites manuellement. Par exemple, pour l'auto-évaluation, c'est une personne, en l'occurrence moi, qui s'occupe de créer les comptes pour les utilisateurs, transmettre les résultats des auto-évaluations. Ça permet un contact direct avec les personnes. Pour le moment, à ce stade-là du projet, Je pense que c'est bien, en fait. C'est un avantage de pouvoir comme ça communiquer facilement avec les personnes qui utilisent l'outil et puis d'obtenir des retours de manière aussi spontanée, quoi, plus one-to-one, comme on dit, quoi. Voilà. Voilà, Isabelle, je pense...
Thank you.
Pour
Do
moi, c'est
you
tout
want
bon,
to add
effectivement.
anything, Isabel?
No, it's okay.
No? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation and also your ambition to make the tools accessible and inclusive. That's also a challenge since we come from so many different circumstances and surroundings. Kristine, you've developed what you call grønt veikart. What's that in English, please?
That's what we call a green roadmap. And it was initiated by the employers' organizations, the producing organizations, and the employees' organization in Norway. And I'm going to just present it as a full here. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation because it's just something we have been part of developing. We are not the owner of it. It's this collectiveness that owns it. But we call it the Green Roadmap, and it embodies a strategic vision designed for sustainable practices and environmental conscious initiatives within Norway's art and culture sector. This is a comprehensive plan that delineates specific actions and guidelines to help us reduce environmental footprints. And it's also to promote sustainability and also to align with our national goals for emission reduction. The background comes quite late in Norway, I'm sorry to say, but it was first in 2016 that the Norwegian government put down this expert panel for this, what they call the green competitiveness. It was trying to eager us to be greener and greener. And it is, we are looking for a very green future already in 2030 with a low emission society by 2015. This initiative materializes into the roadmap for the arts and culture sector. So it's the work itself started in 2020. And it included a diverse series of meetings, of course, surveys, and of course, in-depth interviews. And the efforts was aimed to grasp the sector's very nuanced needs and challenges. And it has resulted in a strategic document serving as a transformative guide for the whole sector. The structure of the roadmap is that the content is 10 immediate actions for the organizations and businesses. Then it's 5 immediate actions for artists and the cultural workers. And then, and what I like the most is that there's 5 immediate actions for the authorities. And they're very specified and very specific. And I just wanted to address the immediate actions for the authorities, because I think that's kind of what we lack at the moment, but is that they have to establish financial support. And we also need to establish scholarship programs for artists practicing sustainability. We have to create funds specifically earmarked for sustainable art and culture projects. That is the first goal for the authorities. And then we have to introduce tax incentives for artists and culture workers embracing sustainable practices. We have to develop incentives for organizations achieving environmental certification. So there has to be some kind of, a bit of a clap on the back when you do this good. And then we have to be investing in education and research. We have to really be focusing on how also education and research can be part also in the art practices, how that can, for a long-term benefit, make sustainable practices in art and culture develop more and be better qualitatively. So integrate sustainability into art education's programs. It's also highly recommended in this roadmap. And then its regulations and action plans is very important for the government to participate in, and that's to implement environmental requirements in the cultural policy guidelines. We have to be better on directing the artists to do sustainable choices and making it easier to take them. And then we need a national action plan for sustainability in the arts and culture sector. It still is not developed in Norway. And then industry partnership is important. We have to encourage collaboration with businesses to promote sustainable practices. And we have to facilitate dialogue between authorities, artists, and businesses and have our shared sustainable goals. The roadmap is used as an inspiration to adapt actions to individual circumstances and needs. It's a kind of a simplification to create a personal plan for green transformation. And the goal of the roadmap is to transform the art and culture sector into a sustainable force. And of course, it has to contribute to Norway's goal for emission reduction by 2030 and support the Paris Agreement. So this roadmap was developed in 2020 and already, or not already, it's quite late, sorry, but what also this led to, and this is kind of the next step then, if you have this kind of roadmap, this agreement resulted in a climate partnership between the government and the culture sector that was signed in September 2020. So the purpose of this agreement within the culture ministry and the culture scene is to establish the foundation for a climate partnership between the government and the culture sector. It's important to have this very formal state. And then the culture sector aims to reduce its carbon footprints and contribute to Norway's goal to becoming a leader in climate actions by 2050. The content of the agreement is maybe a bit interesting to share with you. So we show that we have this partnership, we have an agreement that this is our common goal. And we also, the content of the agreement is also that we use the UN's Sustainable Development Goals as the basis for all our cultural politics in the future. We also have then agreed upon that we have the need of mapping the sector's emissions in general, and that we can do that in collaboration with the Ministry of Culture and Equality in Norway. That's also Equality in Norway. So we have some kind of commitment from both parts on very important issues that needs to be set in motion. And also to have a possibility through this agreement, we have this possibility to quarterly have this dialogue to evaluate the processes, to see milestones and to plan further action. The minute is kind of this formalized agreement, it has become much more easy to make it in your daily or yearly planning of your work. So this was and I really must say that, like, working together with many parts in this way is really, it's of course very challenging because there's many different aspects and needs, but at the same time the quality of the roadmap itself is really the content is very diverse, and also the possibility that you are actually obliging to something. It's much more heavy to break if you want to break it. It's kind of a strongness in this network. So I'm very happy that it came to live, and it's now in the beginning of the process of continuation on a very formal level. So things are really happening in this collaboration with the employers, the producer, and the employees.
Thank you, Kristine. I really envy you having common goal with the employers. Do you find your goals sustainable? I mean, now with the cost of living, we find in Sweden that we focus on other matters because employers find it too expensive to do good. Do you see that in Norway, or do you still work on the same goals?
Since it's just been agreed upon in September with the government, and one of our first tasks is to get more money for everyone to participate better, there's still, you know, the first step has not really been made very concrete, I would say, because it is a question of prioritizing the finances on both sides, and that is of course in heavy times as it is now, where theater productions in Norway are reducing their production amount. Of course, it's difficult but at the same time, they have more time for other work, which actually also is good somehow, in a sense. So yes, we do have the continuation of the dialogue and the necessity of what is needed, you know, these things. So structurally, it may be happening, but practically maybe not yet because of lack of money.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kristine. Karrim, you have this Theatre Green Book in UK, but also the Green New Deal, stepping up your ambitions. Please tell us more.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Theatre Green book, as many of you have actually used and seen, and it's got kind of world and European incarnations of it. It's also kind of widely applicable to kind of more arts and cultural institutions as well, and so it's being more harnessed and more widely used within art galleries, for example, because a lot of the principles are the same, and it's a really excellently put together book that is in 3 separate books. So one looks at the productions and the sustainability productions. The other book looks at the physical environment, the buildings, and how to use the building space. And the third book looks at the operations, so how the business and operates, the catering, the items that they sell within the shops, and so on and so forth. Now, we very much thought, well, we have a tool that is already in existence, and first and foremost, we need to interrogate that tool, make sure that it works for us, or where it doesn't work for us, ensure that there are additional terms and conditions that benefit our workforce in relation to sustainability. So we worked with our Equity for a Green New Deal network and critiqued from a more kind of radical and trade union worker focused perspective, but also maintaining that the book is a really fantastic piece of work that we still want to harness. And so what we've done, rather than reinventing the wheel, is we've sought to harness the book by adding it to some of our collective agreements in terms of production standards. Now, one of the key principles that I think the trade union movement sometimes forgets is if you don't ask, you don't get. So actually, it wasn't particularly banging on the door. It wasn't a particularly difficult negotiation to actually get these things into place. It was actually by us saying, well, we would like you to agree to this. And just having that conversation, explaining why it's important, explaining why it's important to the workforce. Now, of course, depending on the producer, there may be a very different reaction, but there are also a lot of very well-meaning, decent producers that are actually keen to do as much as possible. And when something is placed in front of them and there's an opportunity to do so, they'll take us up on it. So we managed to get 2 companies to actually be mandated within the contract, so within the terms and conditions of the work, which I'm always think is exciting from a kind of keeping bosses accountable and workers holding them accountable, that minimum sustainability standards must be met in terms of productions. So baseline standards must be met as part of that. So then that becomes really a condition of contract, and workers have the opportunity to hold those bosses accountable. We also, for one of our collective agreements, made sure that for the first time it is mandated again as a sort of condition of work that those workers, that the employer, the producers, must have an environmental sustainability policy. So we haven't necessarily gone as far as the other agreements that we have in terms of mandating standards, but actually ensuring that everyone has a policy, but not only that they have a policy, that it is regularly reviewed and adhered to in practice, still opens the door for workers holding employers more accountable in terms of whether their policies actually being adhered to and met, but also make sure that those producers are actually paying more attention and thinking, no, what, actually we could be doing more here. And but the fact that we're reviewing this regularly and we're forced to review it regularly, we're giving ourselves a kind of a positive kick up the backside to do more.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Karrim. Let's move on to our final concluding session. Although this is, I mean, this is a crucial issue for the whole society and the survival of our planet, but the fight against global warming is not the core business of performance unions, at least not historically. But it seems likely to remain on the agenda for the future. And as other unions are starting to reflect upon this topic, could you recall how you began to work on this issue? Did your members take the initiative, or did it come from the top or from the outside? And how do you think it is the union's responsibility to lead this fight in the future? Is it? Who wants to start? How did you begin? Kristine.
So I can go, because this is a very important topic. I think it's always what leads to my plans for action through the board and through the General Assembly is the members. So the engagement from the members is you have to weigh it quite well with your planning, and I'm very happy that my crowd behind me is a very, very active and engaged audience or membership. They are also they are encouraging us and testing us. And today I would also like to just invite some of them here, or I have invited someone here, and if they are ready, maybe we could give the word to them and tell us how they did it, because I think that is a very important voice, to actually give the voice to those who maybe have the strongest engagement. If that's okay for you, Simon,
yes,
and everyone
please.
else.
Maya and Maria, are you with us?
Yes, we're here.
Right, welcome. You're members of NoDa, right?
Yes, we are. We've made a little presentation, so if we could please share the screen with you.
Yes.
Let's see. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can see. Yeah, brilliant.
Great. Okay, my name is Maria Lote, and I'm a dance artist and activist living in Oslo, Norway.
And my name is Maja Roel, and I'm also an activist and a dance artist living in Oslo.
In response to the climate emergency, we, as members of the Norwegian Dance Artist Union, proposed to our union to issue a public statement against future Norwegian oil exploration. The proposal was approved at the union's extraordinary General Assembly in June this year. In addition to making green structural change within the performing arts field, we believe it's important to support bigger structural changes in our society related to the climate and ecological crisis. And we live in Norway, which is a huge oil nation. So for us, this is an important issue. We will discuss our process with our union and why we believe it's important for artist unions to support this initiative. And we want to emphasize that this initiative is something we encourage all art organizations to take part in and make visible. And we will begin by reading the approved resolution that has been translated to English. The Norwegian Dance Artists Union demands an immediate halt to all new petroleum exploration on the Norwegian continental shelf. The rationale for this is to ensure the survival of humanity in the future. The development of new infrastructure for petroleum extraction is incompatible with the goal of achieving the targets of the Paris Agreement and limiting warming to 2 degrees. An escalating climate crisis will impact all parts of society, hitting hardest those with the least resources and least historical culpability in the situation. For NoDa, this is about protecting both current and future members and exercising global solidarity.
So why should workers' union take a stance on oil exploration? We will now present some main reasons why we believe this is a matter concerning performing art unions. The union deals with working conditions for artists. If we are to address the future working condition for artists, we must address the climate. The climate crisis will affect the economy, working condition, and quality of life for artists in the future, making it a matter for the union. Furthermore, protection and solidarity are cornerstones which the labor movement was built and rests upon. This issue is about protecting future members and showing solidarity with those more severely affected by the climate emergency. An escalating climate crisis will impact all parts of society, and it is important for all unions to take a stance in this matter. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, made it crystal clear that the only way to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement is to stop searching for new fossil resources and invest in renewable. There has already been found 7 times more gas and oil than what can be used. Fields open for exploration now will only be extracted in 10 to 15 years, and extraction could last for decades. Opening new oil fields is incompatible with the Paris Agreement's goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 or 2 degrees, and Norway's and other countries' international climate commitments to be emission-free by 2015. We are already seeing the consequences of global warming in extreme weather events such as floods, droughts, and wildfires. The only thing we need for climate change to result in an existential catastrophe is to do nothing and let things continue as before. Therefore, there is no neutral position in this issue. Not taking a stance is also taking a stance.
How can we as artists best use our influence? By standing united with other artist organizations, we will not stand alone. In Norway, 15 artist organizations representing around 20,000 members have jointly signed a petition against oil exploration, and 9 artist unions have issued statements opposing further oil exploration. By taking a position on this issue, we as a united artistic community can use our influence in the most effective way by leveraging our symbolic power. By adopting this resolution, we acknowledge the science and statements from the UN, we show solidarity with other unions, and demonstrate that the art and cultural sector stand united and in demanding a halt to future oil exploration. Historically, trade unions have been involved in many difficult and important struggles that have led to significant changes in society. Issuing a public statement is a concrete action through which we as artists can use our influence most effectively by uniting with other unions and artist organizations. So rather than limiting ourselves to vague formulations about sustainability and environmental measures, let us contribute to the development of the trade unions by adopting a resolution against future oil exploration. Together with decisions made by other unions in the art sector, the resolution will establish a stance that can contribute outwardly to resistance against oil exploration and acknowledge that climate and the environment are fundamental to all unions and societal fields. This initiative can also inspire other unions and organizations to take a stance, creating a domino effect that collectively can exert political pressure on policymakers to stop future oil exploration.
And we have formulated a resolution that is nationally anchored in Norway. You are welcome to use our resolution as a starting point and adapt it to your country. We encourage all artist unions and organizations present this evening to push forward your own resolution for phasing out oil and publish it displayed through your social platforms.
Leading up to this meeting, we have also been informed by some different global initiatives that we encourage you to take a look at. Some of you probably know them from before. The first one is the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative, who are building a movement for a fossil fuel phase-out and fair energy transition. A growing block of countries are joining forces at COP28, which starts today, to begin to seek a negotiating mandate for a fossil fuel treaty. The initiative is supported by World Health Organization and the European Parliament, amongst others. Cities, countries, organizations, and private people can sign this international campaign. And we encourage all of you to do this on their website today. It's very easy.
And another initiative is Entertainment and Culture for Climate Action. This is a network which is a global initiative to unite the cultural sector on common goals and solutions. The initiative is supported by the Secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and UN Organization for Education, Science and Culture.
And then lastly, it's the Climate Heritage Network and Julie's Bicycle, which have made a global call to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change to include cultural heritage, the arts, and creative sectors in climate policy in relation to the COP28. The goal is to decide a joint work decision on culture and climate action, a UN process which would trigger policies and frameworks to enable culture to contribute fully to climate solutions.
And if you want more information about the steps we took to implement this resolution in our union, you're welcome to contact us by email. The email stands there. We encourage you all to take action towards implementing similar public statements in your unions and artist organizations, and to take a look at and sign these online global initiatives.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, Lotte, and Maya Ruel, for your initiative and for your pushing of all of us. I think we are our members and we really need you to push us forward. Thank you so much. Just a short question. This initiative that you've taken has included many more organizations in Norway than NoDa. How has it been received by the public? that the artists engage in this manner?
Do you mean like the members of NoDa or?
No, I mean the
Publicly.
public outside. I mean,
Outside.
Norway also being an oil country, how has it been received?
Yeah, they had this. It was some resistance to it, or it made some discussions, and people were like also talking a lot about that the cultural sector is very oil funded, and now when artists are speaking against oil, how can you then produce your art that is all based on oil money? So it was kind of met with this kind of
Yeah, those kind of questions.
those kind of questions.
Yeah.
And
But
also,
we also had to specify that we focus on stopping future oil exploration. So this is something that we need is a system change, and like we are all part of the system, and we acknowledge that the arts are being funded by the oil, but we also want to make changes for the future, and it's impossible for us to continue to search for oil, or we can, but then we're going to have a really bad future.
No, thank you.
I
Let
just want to-
Kristine
And
give
I
a
also
comment
want to
as well.
say just that there were a few artist organizations who started doing this, but it also created a very positive effect with other artist organizations and unions. So from when it started, more and more organizations have joined the initiative, and we have also received a lot of support from organizations who have already gone through this process. So I really feel like we get a lot of support from the arts community.
Good. I'm glad to hear. Kristine, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I just want to say that, of course, this issue of, which was maybe also part of this discussion, is that whether unions that have very artistically goals, how can have we take upon this big industry in Norway? Why, of course, we have had that discussion in the media as well, especially since more and more unions now run through the system, this declaration, and really start to say yes to this opprop. But what I like then is that, of course, then we can have the discussion, and I'd rather have the discussion than not having it. I think that's very important, because the members want to discuss it. So we need to facilitate that one way or another. If we want or not want, that's the same. We have to do it. It's my role. It's my place to do it. It comes. We have to discuss it, and without that engagement, I wouldn't have had the ability to have that discussion in a very profound and very, cut through way. And I really admire your engagement, Maya and Maria. I thank you for it from the bottom of my heart, that you actually use this. This is just a structure that we always have to work within, regarding whether it's that topic or that topic. And also to be very clear towards all of you here today, that this is also my opinion. I want you all guys to sign this kind of resolutions, and I was hoping for that we in our community in FIA could address this globally as well. Just so I support it 100%.
Thank you. But you've also been able to connect it to the core values of the union, and I think that it's not that difficult to say that this is a part of the labor market's condition. But I think it's important to really use the tools that we have, that we know. I give the floor to Ian, because you raised your hand before, and then I give the floor to Karrim.
Thanks. In speaking about the origins, I know that my own origin starts as training as an architect at the time that the LEED building certification was coming online, and then seeing that it was a gap. And I think that though not a number of my kin within our local and beyond that have different ways in which they've come to the topic. One of the things that I think is pretty universal, at least in our North American systems, is that many of our organizations are set up in such a way in which they are primarily evaluated, especially within the charitable and not-for-profit sector, where we interact quite a bit. And where most of our engagement happens through elements of fiduciary duty. And because of public funding, as that wanes and waxes, especially because Canada similarly is economy is primarily based in resource extraction. It's a oil producer as well as through lumber and forestry. Through that there is a lot of systematic. It's a challenge within the systems in which we work to integrate this work, and so that as a union, so putting my union hat on, that because it's about representing as we were hearing, so this is just sort of adding on to, it is an organization of people looking to protect people and our values and what's defined within those negotiations of sustainability, of being able to meet the needs of the future. And as I say, that union participation and membership and leadership is really about making our working conditions better within the labor that we're doing, that we're finding that it's extending those into the other values that we have, that it's one thing to make sure that everybody has a good living and such, but also the quality of that life moving ahead. And I think that's joined a number of our members together in wanting to take action like this.
Thank you, Ian. Karrim, how have you been pushed by your members?
Yeah, I mean, before joining Equity, I had quite a lot of experience with campaigning and activism on environment, particularly on divestment relating to fossil fuel divestment. So I was an activist within my local area of Southwark, and also an activist with Extinction Rebellion. So I had already been part of groups kind of working to take money out of fossil fuels and put it into sustainable infrastructure, and also took a kind of union role in looking at the local authorities' pension scheme, which was valued at about £1.6 billion. So a really huge pension scheme and a really effective way of being able to take money out of fossil fuels and put it into better, more ethical companies. So when I joined Equity, I was sort of pleasantly surprised to actually meet someone that I knew from that activist movement anyway, who was a key activist at Equity, and actually another activist as well, because they had been passionate about divestment. So it was quite an easy link in, because they were part of our Equity for a Green New Deal network. It was also quite an easy link in anyway, because not only do we have a really strong, well-organized network, but also we have a modal age of 28 for our membership, and they are acutely aware of the impact of the climate crisis, and they're going to be disproportionately impacted by it, and in fact are disproportionately impacted by it, because it's not going to be now, it is already happening. So they're very passionate, and they've, as I mentioned in kind of previous answers, the union and its members led the work on prioritising and changing the policy direction of the union, and have really galvanised me every time I kind of meet with them to make sure that I do as much as I can, that I kind of commit even more to it, because sometimes, like all of you here, sometimes you sort of can lose a bit of faith, and you can kind of get a bit knackered by it all. And so sometimes actually having these amazing activists who are spending their spare time, I get to do it in a paid time now at work. Obviously I do my other activism at home, but spending their spare time just trying to improve it really galvanizes me to work a lot harder. The one thing that I think is worth saying as well, which was beautifully put about kind of well-being and dignity, is that I think unions have historically been really shit on climate crisis. They've actually hindered progress. They've been incredibly slow to respond, and there's still really, really problematic legacy issues within a lot of big unions, which is really problematic. But those members within those unions are changing the policy direction, and the scale of the crisis is forcing them to change their policy direction as well, which is really, really important. And one of the key things that I think should never be underlooked is about that inextricable link between dignity, well-being, and sustainability, because we can start to actually place the working conditions and have workers understand that actually work-life balance is sustainability, because they get to stay at home and cook instead of eating takeaways or grabbing food from a supermarket. They get to look after their family and friends and be with them. They stay more locally anyway, so they're not having emissions from going into the city and into other places, but also they get to have more time to put into collective causes and activism. So there are so many intrinsic links that we shouldn't forget, around like offering better terms and conditions and sustainability. So if we reduce the hours that they are working, reduce the number of days that they are working, they are major components for change, as much as, you know, mandating sustainability requirements.
Thank you, Karrim. I'm really glad you addressed that with our legacy as unions. And how we've not always been going the right way. But it's really important because there's still unions, of course, fighting change. So we have a work to do. Thank you, Karrim. I want to hear from Isabel as well, please.
Oui, alors quelques mots par rapport à ces projets, parce que c'est un peu ce qu'on a, en tant que syndicat, on a commencé à mener. Il a été créé en 2022. Et les projets pilotes avec les sites internet, ça fait une année maintenant, avec un bureau ou un comité de 6 personnes qui l'amènent. Alors, on va voir par où il va. C'est assez spécifique aussi de notre syndicat. On est confronté, on a une douzaine en Suisse on a une centaine, on va dire, de théâtres, dont 12 sont signataires de notre convention collective. Mais nous, en tant que syndicat, on se voit et on s'est vu avec la pandémie être entre les deux, entre compagnie et employeur-employé. Tout le monde avait les deux casquettes. Et ça, c'est compliqué toujours à gérer, mais en même temps, cela a donné fruit à ces si beaux projets qui facilitent en fait la tâche et donnent des directrices aux compagnies et même au théâtre pour pouvoir justement aller dans ce sens et lutter contre le réchauffement et donner des outils pour la durabilité. Nous, depuis que j'ai pris fonction, je viens d'un gros syndicat aussi. Je suis d'accord avec ces problématiques qu'on est des fois avec 3 trains de retard par rapport au climat. Pour moi, c'est le syndicat suisse romand du spectacle. Il avait signé une initiative menée par UNIA, ces grands syndicats et des partis de gauche pour que la confédération, par exemple, la confédération fédérale intervienne avec entre un 0,5 et 1% du PIB pour mettre en place des mesures concrètes pour lutter contre le réchauffement. Ça, c'est des choses qu'on a fait un peu plus concrètement. Après, dans le futur de ce qu'on voit, pour moi, c'est évident que les syndicats doivent être dans la première ligne pour assurer les conditions de travail des travailleurs et travailleuses. Parce qu'on l'a vu, 2 anecdotes qui ont touché la Suisse cette année, c'est la canicule et une tempête. On a eu 270 km, une tempête avec 270 km à l'heure qui a annulé dans ma ville, à la Chaux-de-Fonds, dans les côtés nord-ouest de la Suisse, qui a annulé un des festivals les plus grands des arts des rues. Et ça a été toute une catastrophe pour l'entièreté de noyau local des artistes qui n'ont pas pu profiter de ces festivals, et il n'y a rien qui les permet de pouvoir survivre avec ça. Pour la canicule, cette année, Genève et Lausanne se sont vus avec des températures de 37 voire 40 degrés. Alors qu'il y a tous les festivals en plein air qui sont en éclosion, et les conditions de travail, elles étaient pénibles. Alors, il faut encore une fois pas inventer la rue. Il faut collaborer avec des autres syndicats, avec l'inspection du travail. Par exemple, Genève, ils ont déclaré cet été, avec l'accord des syndicats et des patronats, d'arrêter de travailler à partir de midi, ou voire 2 heures, parce que avec les goudrons, avec les températures, les machines, c'était impossible de travailler. Alors, important, ces genres de mesures dans les arts de la scène, parce que c'est indispensable. On est face à ces changements climatiques qui est évident. Et travaillons aussi il faut mener quand même un peu le combat, et pour que, comme nos collègues ont dit, si on ne demande pas, on n'en a rien. Dans le secteur aussi de la construction, ils sont des assurances pour les intempéries, et ils sont au chômage technique en cas de tempête ou de neige, etc. Alors, c'est des choses qu'on peut importer sans souci dans notre système, et qui pourrait donner conscience, parce que ce n'est pas seulement nous, c'est aussi, si on revient à la canicule, c'est les publics qui en souffrent. À 40 degrés, on ne peut pas faire un festival ou avoir des spectacles, les publics, s'il n'y a pas d'ombre, s'il n'y a pas de... Alors, réfléchissons aussi à ces types de matériaux qui nous permettent, et puis ce type d'endroits qui nous permettent de pouvoir avoir des conditions convenables d'un côté, mais aussi que et puis ramenons à la société à être aussi consommatrice de ces festivals ou de cette culture qui est durable. C'est là un peu les lignes de conclusion que je voulais porter aujourd'hui.
Thank you, Isabel. I'd like to remind all of you to look at the chat, because there's been several interesting questions and contributions there. And this webinar is recorded, as you all know. When we release it, please assess it among your members and publish it on your websites so all of our members can take part of it. We have a lot of work to do. It's really heavy times right now. The winter is coming. We have great conflicts in the world that seem difficult to solve. We need to change our practices, but also use our practices for a positive change. And I think this is a time for organizing. This is a time for organization. So we have as leaders and as unions, we have a great responsibility, but also a window to really do things. So I'd like to conclude with that and thank all the panelists for your tremendously generous contributions and insights. And I wish you all the best in the future. And I wish all you at home listening, also, I hope you all got inspired and got some ideas. It's really difficult when we see the forest, but everyone starts with one step, with one little tree, and then we move from there. So thank you all. Have a good night.